Hello everyone and welcome back to Big Dan's Airgun Reviews channel. Today we're going to take a look at the Walther Rotex Varmint. Now this one was requested quite a while ago by one of our viewers and I'm so sorry it's taken this long to get one looked at, but we've had one available sitting spare and just begging to be shot, so I thought why not take it out and run it through her paces and see what we think of the Rotex itself. So as with all of our reviews, we're going to get it tested for handling, talk about the features, we're going to weigh the thing, test its consistency, and then we're going to do some accuracy testing. We've got a bit of a fun idea for our final accuracy test, but I'm not going to spoil it here. But yeah, overall we finally got the Walther Rotex, and as we said, sorry for the wait, but let's put her through her paces and see what we think. Next up, features. Okay then, so features of the Walther Rotex Varmint. What do you get? One thing I will say here and now is we have tried moving back around the farm, as you can see, and the wind is every bit as bad. So I am sorry about that, but we're going to have to soldier on, I think, and just see what I can do in editing to try and get rid of some of that. Starting off at the rear, as always, you've got a really nicely finished rubber butt pad there, which is also ventilated, which is quite nice to see. Further on, we're quite glad to report that this is in fact an ambidextrous rifle. So you can shoot this comfortably whether you're a lefty or a righty. The only thing I will mention is that the bolt is not transferable to the left-hand side, so you will still be cocking it with your right hand. Bit of a nuisance perhaps, but it's definitely usable. The rifle also features some really nice sort of scroll pattern work going on in the grip and in the forestock that you can see here, that again we'll talk a bit more about it when it comes to the handling section. Further along at the rear here we have got a safety, that little toggle you can see just sitting out of the back there. Now what I will say is the newer Rotexes come with an automatic safety, whereas this one is in fact the manual safety. You can see it's just been pulled out here as we packed it away, put it on safe. Again, it's a horses for courses thing. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we get to the handling section, but if she's a manual safety, the rifle you pick up, she's an older model, but if you'd rather the auto safety, see if you can find yourself a newer one. Slightly further down we also have the adjustable two-stage trigger, but again we'll talk a bit more about that later. Now with this rifle, it is indeed, you'll see when we get to the mag loading section, the action itself cycles the mag, not the mag being self-cycling. So with this you can see you've got the mag lock toggle on the side here, and if we can just pan it inside there, hopefully you might be able to see at the base of the breech in there, you can see the little arm that pokes through the bottom and cycles the mag around. So yeah, that's the setup for this gun. Again, some like that, some don't. This is where things get quite a bit more interesting though. As you can see, the Walther Rotex uses a buddy bottle, not an air cylinder, and because of this, one thing I'm very happy about, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get the camera under there to let you see it. You might be able to see that there, I'm not sure. The pressure gauge is right where it should be, away from the bloody barrel. Artemis and Crowell, if you're watching this, please take notes. But yeah, things are where they should be. The Rotex is also a regulated rifle, or they're advertised as regulated. We'll get this tested when it comes to the consistency section with the Chronograph. We'll see just how good that reg really is. One thing I will mention with these is that, and this is from experience of mine, is that with these, if you're filling them, please make sure that you've got a moisture trap on the pump or on the compressor, whatever you're using. The reason why I say that is because for some reason, it may be due to the setup, we're not sure, the Rotexes do seem to be quite susceptible to corrosion around the regs, the valves, you name it. So if you're thinking about one of these, please definitely make sure you get one of those, because otherwise if you don't, you might have regulator failure, something will fail in there and it's going to bleed its air left, right and centre all over the place. So please make sure you have a moisture trap. But moving slightly further along, the thing that we're all really here to see me talk about is that barrel, because that is in fact a Lothar Walther barrel, which is some of the best in the business. How good is it really? Well, we'll see if it's all marketing hype when we put it through our accuracy testing a bit later on, which we've also got some fun plans with as well, with our final bit of long range shooting we plan on doing, but I don't want to spoil too much at the minute. The barrel itself is also threaded, and you can see the rather quite attractive, I'd say, thread protector on the end there. So yeah, it is threaded for a silencer if you want to do it. Sorry about that, I have one of those bloody little thunderbugs crawling into my eye. But yeah, the other nice little addition is built into the stock here, and you can see it's moulded into the forestock. You've also got an accessory rail, so you can put a bipod on there, which could be handy because these are semi-hefty. Put a bipod, even a torch, something like that. It's just a nice little feature to have. So that's pretty much it for features of the Walther Rotex Varmint. So let's move on now to weight and see just how heavy this old beast really is. Okay, so weight, we have got her on the scales now. Let's take a look. She comes out at this present moment in time with no scope at 8.76 pounds. So it's easy to see why these are, well, when a weighty PCP is mentioned, there's usually somebody that chirps up about a Rotex. But as we always say, this can feel completely different when you've actually got the thing up to your shoulder. So let's move on to handling soon, and let's see what she really does feel like. Moving on. So, loading the mag, how do we get that done? You will see there's 3 pellets already loaded. That's because this is the second take. A pair of swans just flew over a second ago, and I had to, well, I heard the wing flapping sound and wondered what the heck it was. Big old birds in reality. Right, so back on topic. Loading the mag. Thankfully with this, it is as simple as anything. Simply get your pellet, poke it home. I said it's simple, I am fluffing it left, right and centre, but trust me, don't laugh. Try loading a mag through a camera, then get back to me. But yeah, it's simply a case of poking it home. Now if you're wondering which side to poke it through, you can see there they've included a little handy little arrow there that you can poke the pellets through with. It's a good mag. It's a simple mag. The action itself cycles the magazine, so you've not got to, not with some of the Artemis mags and such, we hear the click, 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 or Crowell mags. You get none of that. It's literally poke it in, put it in the gun, and you're ready to rock and roll. So, speaking of the gun, I think now it's time to put it to the shoulder and see what we think of it. Let's get ready for our handling section. So, handling. What do we think of the Walther Rotex RM8 Varmint? Well, as you saw on the scales, she's definitely a heftier rifle, I'll put it that way. The thing is though, it's not actually, for me, I'll put it this way, it actually feels quite nice. And I know that sounds like a cop-out and sort of like advertising, marketing speak, but what it is if you shoulder one of these, or if you've already got one of these, shoulder this, and then shoulder, if you've got one, your underlever spring gun. Now you'll see why, for me, this isn't too bad. It feels, the balance even, is very similar to what you get with an underlever Springer. Now, it's not perfect 50-50, nowhere near. In fact, it is quite nose heavy. Now, the interesting thing with this is I can't show you, like we usually do, how nose heavy this is. Because usually, if you've seen this channel before, we put our hands forward or back, rear of the stock, so you'll see how it leans and such until we find it where it's completely spot on. I can't do this with this, because the Germans knew that we was going to do this, and they gave the rifle a really, really long trigger guard. So if you've got big hands like myself, your palm strikes the trigger guard and it balances perfectly in the dead center. Clever. But no, the only thing I can show you, unfortunately, don't get me wrong, I am gripping it now, but I'll show you roughly where it's balanced, and it's pretty much more or less where my thumb is now, maybe just behind it, about say here. That's the balance point on this rifle. So you can see it's a little bit further forward than maybe some would have liked. You definitely do feel that extra weight in your lead in hand. Now, it's not necessarily a bad feeling, not for someone if you're used to spring guns or heavier rifles in general. In fact, I often find that more weight in the leading hand helps you keep it just that little bit more controlled than something that's just feather light on the front end. But it is maybe definitely more weight up there than what some people might like. The other thing I'm going to mention, speaking about the stock and the grip and the balance and such, is that this scroll sort of checkering, stippling, I don't know quite what you would call that actually, it's sort of a weird combination of both. That does feel really, really nice in your hands. It really does. And it's not like some of the cheaper rifles that we test on this channel, which are, they've got stippling, but it's sort of a bit like stripper rules really. You can look at it, but you can't really touch it. You can't feel anything. But yeah, with this, you can definitely feel it, and it's definitely a case of if you're using this in poor weather conditions, it is going to give you more grip here and now. But overall, it's to feel it, it's a nice gun. The cheek piece itself is quite nice, and like we said, it is ambidextrous, so lefties will definitely have some fun with this gun. The only thing I will say, it is, don't get me wrong, this is the synthetic version, but I believe it is also, going off memory, it's the same with the wooden stock version. It is very plasticky, the trigger's plastic, this is all, even the trigger guard's plastic. If they could have made that separate little piece of metal going through, would have been nice. Is it the end of the world? No, but at the same time, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Something with a Walther badge, especially. But let's talk about loading the mag now, because this is a little bit different, where this is the action cycling the mag, not the mag itself. So what you have to do, as with most PCPs, if you can see that, rock that bolt back, and what you have here is a little magazine sort of retaining switch, we'll call it, and simply push that back and it will allow you to load the mag from the left hand side. Mag goes in there, absolute piece of cake. Then after that, there's two things you can do. You can push that switch forwards, which hopefully you saw then. You can push that switch forwards, which will lock the mag in place, or closing the bolt will do both jobs in one go. So just like that, and two jobs, or two birds with one stone, we'll say. Now let's talk about the safety before we test that trigger. Now the safety is very, very similar to what you saw on our Webley Eclipse, or if you've seen our underlever shoot off videos. If you have, don't bother watching the second one, just watch the first one. Trust me, that is the best one. But yeah, all you have to do with this is, with the safety, there's a little switch inside of the switch, and like I was saying, this is very similar to the Eclipse or the hat stand safeties. So simply put your thumb into the button there and pull back. Actually, I'm lying to you, you don't have to do that when it comes to engaging the safety. You can simply pull it through. And when it comes to disengaging the safety, if you can see that, so she's safe now. If you want to disengage it, hopefully you can see there's a little switch here. Push that forwards, in she goes, job done. Now the safety is plastic. Again, you know we complain a bit when it comes to plastic on this channel. The safety is plastic, but it is nicely finished. You've got a lovely little sort of, you might have seen it, sort of almost like a checkered pattern going through it, and it doesn't feel that cheap, even though it's plastic, I'll put it that way. So that's the safety out the way. Let's talk about the bolt and the trigger, because that is the next important, closest important bit to the barrel, in my opinion. So let's give that a squeeze. On second stage now, if you can see that. See, that's pretty good, but it is slightly deceptive, and the reason why I say that is because we're cheating a little bit. If we haven't mentioned it already, this rifle has had the trigger adjusted out the box. There's a good reason for that. That was because when we was doing just some early accuracy testing with this, they're not that great out the box. I've got to say that here and now. They're heavy, they're creepy, not all that. This one, simply with, if you can see, there's a hole in the trigger guard there, there's a little screw in front. We have tweaked this trigger a little bit just to bring it a little bit more in line with how I personally would like it. And it's acceptable, I'll put it that way. But here's the thing. Something I want to show you. There is one thing about this trigger that does really irk me, and let's just cock this once more and I'll show you what I mean. Now the other thing I'm going to say is, with this, the action, as I think we might have said earlier, cycles the mag when you push the bolt forwards as well as simply pushing the pellet in. So you might notice with these, you might have seen there, it's not the harshest bolt in the world. In fact, it's really not bad, but it's not on, say, Artemis M11 M22 standards, we'll put it that way, not silky smooth. But let's just give this trigger another go, and you'll hopefully see what I was talking about the trigger. So like we said, it's deceptive. So that second stage there, first shot we had, that trigger just pulled and off it went. There was no creep. Let's see what we get this time. So pulling, see that, off it goes. That time we had some creep. And you can, I've had a little play with this, and I can't seem to get it into a setting where there is zero creep whatsoever without making it dangerous. I'll put it that way. So let's just give that another go. So we're going to cock the rifle, push it forwards. You can see there's a little bit of resistance there as you push forwards, but it's definitely not the end of the world. Let's just give that another go. Right, so second stage right there. So we're on second and pulling. No creep. So we had no creep, creep, no creep. When it comes to longer range accuracy testing, and this is not foreshadowing of our accuracy testing later on, we'll see, but when it comes to accuracy testing, that can throw you off, especially when you're taking, say, longer range shots, and you want a trigger to be as consistent as you can, and just when you think that's going to fire like it did the last shot, creep, nothing happens, and then you have to resettle yourself all over again. It's not the worst trigger that I've ever shot, not even close, but it's also not the best, and that might have to be thought about if you're thinking about one of these rifles. But overall, handling wise, it's pretty good. The stock is quite nice. Even people who are anti-synthetic stock, I highly advise, if you've got one of these or you know a shop near you that has one in stock when the lockdown ends, give it a shoulder. It might just change your mind. This isn't like your usual cheap, nasty plasticky stock. This actually genuinely feels really nice. It's not rubberized like some of the lovely BSA synthetic stocks are, but it's a close second, I'll put it that way. It is a nice feeling thing. So that's it for handling, sort of a bit of a mixed bag, but mainly positive. Let's move on next to consistency. So let's whip the chronograph out. We're going to be testing the rifle for shot count, consistency and power. And let's see just what you can expect from your Walther Rotex. Now, Walther quote these, I believe, in 2.2 for 180 full power shots from a fill. So let's see if they're lying to us or not. Let's get that chrono out. So Walther Rotex consistency, what do we think? Well, actually, it's pretty good. I've got to give props to Walther on this one when they said, or they quoted 184 power shots per fill. In my experiences, manufacturers pretty consistently lie with this sort of thing, but if I can just flick it for you so I can then get my big fat hand out the way, you can see there you've got 10.44 at 174th shot. Then from 175 and onwards, it bleeds off. You can't complain about that. That's pretty good. Consistency wise, the rifle was also in pretty damn good company. You had a maximum spread of around, I think it was averaged around 21 FPS spread, or 21 or 25 I believe, before it properly started bleeding off. And on top of that, you also had a standard deviation. I think it was about 5, but I think for a long time it was about 4.9, something like that. So consistency wise, it's pretty good. It's in good company. You're in there, up there with the Zabroya Hortizia, the Artemis M16, guns that you know I do praise. Now, there is one thing that must be said, and that is that the Walther regulator, although pretty good, it is slower to charge than the Artemis and the Zabroya Hortizia. For instance, you might have seen, if you rewind the footage back, you'll see where we took a break, say shooting the gun when we was reloading the mags, and in that time the regulator filled itself up, and you'll see that shot would then be semi-high. Then after that, I'd give it say 10 seconds between shot, or shots I should say, and then you'd see the reg would behave itself and you'd get that good spread. If you shoot the thing rapidly, we found this out with our preliminary testing, if you shoot the thing rapidly or at the standard rate at which we usually chrono the guns, the power sinks. And then when you've loaded a mag or just waited say 2-3 seconds, it's up a bit again. So you do, if you take your time with it, you do get some pretty good consistency out of this gun, it must be said, but just remember to take your time. So it's a bit of a con depending on what you plan on using this gun for. It's not maybe as, in that way, as consistent as the Artemis or the Zabroya reg, or the older Zabroya regs, but it's not bad. I mean, if you're doing bench rested shoot and things like that, you're taking your time with it, you're not really going to feel that whatsoever. So overall, pretty good, but just bear the regulator and its characteristics, shall we say, in mind. So we know what numbers it's doing, but how does that translate to efficiency downrange, shall we say? So why don't we now get this thing all zeroed in, maybe chuck a different scope on, because that one's not really manly enough what we've got on there at the moment, and let's, when the wind dies down, head back down the field and have a bit of fun at maybe some longer ranges. So that'll do it for the chronograph section. Let's go have some fun. Okay then, so the fun bit, accuracy testing time. Now we've, as you can see, done a little bit of testing already. This has been done, as I'm sure you can tell, and you might even be able to hear the birds singing as it goes. This is completely outdoors at our new sort of field range, shall we say, where we can take things a bit further. I will say it is not a still day here at all. If I just pan the camera up there, you can see the wind is blowing a little bit. We also do occasionally get the occasional strong gusts and things like that. But we have done some testing. These, where we've got the pellet tins laid out, is nothing to do with the groups you can see underneath here. This is just to show what we've used. We've tried the Wasps, which I believe gave us that, which at 25 yards, hopefully if I just pan it up there, you might be able to see the target still sitting up there now. 25 yards, not a whole lot of good. We then had the Crossman Premier Domes. Now with these, if I can find it, nope, it's not that, it is this. We put 2 mags through just to see what was going on, and it was absolutely all over the place. We then tried the JSB Exact Jumbo, which gave us the best group out of all. If you can just see, if I can pull it down a bit so you can see it better, that's the grouping there. And if we carry on then, we've got the SMK Victory Heavy Shocks. Now these were quite interesting because the first group we did, you see, is here. That's a full mag with 1 flyer off to the left. Granted, there's a vertical string, but at this moment in time, I'm still trying to get used to that Walther trigger. It's not bad, really. I mean, bearing in mind the elements what we're having to fight with now, if you had this at, say, in an indoor range or a garden range where you've got a high fence, that'd probably be a lot tighter than that. That goes with all of these groups. We actually tried them again here. And you can see here we've got a solid cluster here, but again we had that 1 flyer. The cluster itself is actually smaller than what we had with the JSB, so we might actually do the accuracy testing with the heavy shocks and the JSBs back to back. After this, we then tried the Rifle Super Magnum, which with the first grouping actually did reasonably well. If I can find it, here it is. The only thing is, it gave us 2 groups with 1 flyer down here. They seem to sort of open up. We had, say, the first 5 shots went through this little hole here, then we had 1, 2, and then 1. There's 5 or 6, however many in the grouping there, but again, it is 2 groups. Finally, we had Super Domes. Now, Super Domes originally did really well, but then Told you. Originally they did really well, but then after this it sort of opened up and it started spraying them all over the place. Could it have been wind? Could it have been me? Could it have been the barrel just not really liking Superdomes? Well, what we're going to do is we're now going to move the target out to 35 yards, which it's a little bit unfair comparing it to some of the other guns we've tested because that is around the farm, and admittedly whilst that is a bit sheltered from the wind and you do still get a gust go through there, but it's a lot more sheltered than what we have right now. So we're going to push the target out to 35 yards just like we do with the other guns, and we'll film the group that we get done there, and then after that we're going to push the target out to 50 yards and see what the rifle can do at that range, because it could be interesting seeing the difference between heavy and lightweight pellets in this sort of gusty weather. After that we've got something fun planned, but again I don't want to spoil it. So as I'm sure you can hopefully see, the rifle does need another pump up, which I'm not looking forward to, but especially not in this heat, but never mind. We're going to give that another pump up. Well, how bad can it be? Push the target out to 35, and then we'll try the JSBs and the SMK Victory Heavy Shocks and see which one comes out on top. So let's get to pumping. Right, our 35 yard outdoor in the, well, as natural as it gets where I am right now, to be fair, but in wide open to the elements, which pellet did the best? Well, it's quite clearly the JSB, but we probably saw that coming. The heavy shocks, I gave them a chance because they're usually pretty good, but here, let's move that a bit sideways. But here you can see we had a fairly nice group that almost wanted to come through near the end there. We had about 3 or 4 in that one little hole there, but the problem is we also have these 3. That might actually be 2 in there, you know, but I'm not sure. We've got this little pattern off to the right hand side here, so you never know. If you wanted to run the gun in on heavy shocks and really let it into those, you never know what group you might get with them. But saying that, there was only one winner at 35 yards, and that was the JSBs. Now we've got one off to the left, which again could be me, it could be the wind, which is actually blowing now. You might hopefully the mics are blocking that out, and you've got one little shot just off of the main group just up here. Now without that, I haven't got a 5p piece to prove it, but that's 5p all day long. But with this here and this here, you're probably going to be looking at 20p with just the corner of that maybe just poking through. So not the most impressive group maybe at 35 yards, but again, like we said, this is outdoors. This is not even in the garden with a high fence sort of blocking the wind off. This is literally, if I pan it back up, hopefully you can see we're wide open to attack right now. You can also see that the wooden stake over there was where the camera was originally rested, our 35 yard mark. If you can see that, there's also where the target is resting now, further in the distance at 50 yards. So that's what we're going to try next. We're going to completely ignore the Victory shocks or heavy shocks, because I don't think there's much of a point at this moment in time, and focus mainly on the JSBs. If we can get it done today, because if you can see that over there, we've had some swans turn up, and I don't really want to frighten them off because we don't see many around these parts, so I'm going to let them do their thing for a bit and then we'll get back to shooting. So let's move on. Well, I was hoping we could end this with a bit of a bang, but unfortunately at 50 yards at least, not going to happen. We're actually 2 shots missing. These are 8-shot mags in 2.2, and you can see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now in here there's definitely, I know 2 went in here. Hopefully you can see that in the replay. I'm wondering if we've actually got 3 in here, because the group we've got here is broken up. You can see that's 2 pellet holes, but with this one, it's a bit of an odd shape really. It's like one sort of half clipped it here, if you can see that on the left hand side. So I'm wondering if that's actually potentially maybe 3 shots. So you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 up there. So I'm wondering if there's 3 in there, which again isn't bad, and it goes to show when the wind's behaving itself, it's got a ton of potential for accuracy. But well, that's the thing with shooting outdoors with no walls around you. Unfortunately, you're at the mercy of Mother Nature. But I'm lying to you. We are going to end this episode with a bang, even if that group was perhaps not the best, but it is what it is. Although this was a bad thing when this happened in the past, the Germans and the Italians are going to help us finish this episode on a slightly flashier note, shall we say. German rifle, obviously, but Italian Fiocchi cartridge. That is a blank. We've not actually put a 9mm bullet inside of a piece of wood, and we're going to chuck that out at say 30 yards. I'm not going to adjust zero too much. You can see someone's already had some fun. We're not going to adjust zero too much with this. We're just going to stick it in the ground, have a few shots, and see if we can make it go bang before we run out of the mag. So let's see what we can do. And with that out of the way, and with our swans returning, who I really would have thought would have landed in another field, but hey ho, especially after that noise, what do we think of the Walther Rotex? Well, there's a lot going for it, but there's a few things that need to be mentioned, and a few things that maybe, I don't know, could be better. If there's ever going to be a Mark II Rotex, this is what I really want Walther and Numerex, whoever designs this gun, I want you to pay attention to this. We'll start off with the negatives. As we always say, no gun's perfect. What do we think about the Walther Rotex? What can I tear it apart for? The most important thing to me, or one of the most important things to me on a gun, is the trigger. This has got a wonderful barrel, and it proves the point that it doesn't matter how good your barrel is if the trigger isn't up to par. Now don't get me wrong, there's plenty of worse triggers out here. In fact, out of the box, I might even say, I don't know, this and the Artemis M22's trigger, it's neck and neck. But the thing where the Artemis M22 has got the advantage is that the trigger is consistent. It's almost as though this gun has been designed to be used by someone who not yanks the trigger, but someone who's got a faster trigger finger. I tend to be a bit more methodical when it comes to squeezing the trigger on the gun. I like to take my time, feel it when it's going to break, and then when it does break, it does, sort of thing. With this, it catches you off guard, and that's what I'm going to put a few of these flyers down to, what you can see down here. Because sometimes you get that little creep, and other times it'll pull smoothly and beautifully, and then off it goes. If you could even keep it so as it crept every time, it would be better. That's how the M22 got away with me saying it's an okay trigger on the Artemis M22, because although it crept, it was a very consistent creep. Every single time it was those 3, tap, 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 then off it went. With this, you don't get that. You'll get it once, and then the next 2 shots, it just won't do it. So you're sort of left thinking, when the hell is this gun going to fire? Again, it's not dangerous, and there's definitely far worse out there. When it comes to pull weight, out the box they're heavy, don't get me wrong, but this one, you can adjust them so as they're reasonably light, but you can never quite, at least I don't think, I can't seem to quite get it the way that I want it. Other thing I'm going to mention is the gun is a heavy gun. Now this, if you're someone like me, you won't mind that. You actually might find it feels a little bit more solid. You might prefer it. I quite like the weight of this. I even like the way that it's ever so slightly nose heavy for reasons that I mentioned earlier in the video. But if you're looking for an ultra lightweight hunting gun, something like that, and you don't really want something like a tank barrel that you're lugging around with you the whole time, this is not going to be for you. Other things that I'm just going to mention, and again this does go with every PCP, but these do seem a little bit more susceptible to it, if I'm honest, compared to the other ones. The regulators on these, you do have to give them time to refill. You might notice when we was doing the accuracy testing, and we did say with the chrono testing as well, we was giving it longer time per shot. The other reason obviously is because of the wind as well. It was really quite gusty earlier. We was giving it time for the wind to settle, but also for the regulators to sort of recharge. Now granted, every PCP does that to an extent, but the Walthers, especially when the pressure starts creeping down just a little bit, they do take longer than average, so that has to be brought into mind, brought into consideration. The other thing is the reg itself. Like I said, please, if you're using a pump, I was going to show you mine, but I don't know where it is now actually. If you're using a pump, please make sure that you're using one with a moisture pack, or whatever you're using. If it's not a bottle, make sure it's got a moisture pack attached, because the regs on here, As with a lot of PCPs, again, to be fair, you should always make sure you're using them no matter what PCP you have. But when there's leaks with these, which can happen, it's usually where there's something in here has corroded. Obviously through water damage, where water's been able to seep through and it's got damp. So please make sure you're using a moisture pack if you do plan on using one of these. Other than that, it's actually, there's quite a lot of positives with it. Obviously, number one is you've got that barrel. The Walther barrel is quite nice, it's got to be said. Again, it is let down by the trigger, but there's people out there that obviously that love stripping these. Obviously, mind your warranty if you do, but people that love stripping these, working away at the sears, and I know you could make a much better trigger out of this with what you have. Obviously, I've got to review it in pretty much standard configuration, but you can make this a much nicer trigger, and when you do, it will be a ridiculously accurate rifle. On top of that, like I said, the stock is nice. The sort of pattern, the scroll pattern you can see there, hopefully poking through, is very nicely done. It does feel nice in the palm. The gun overall, like I said, it does shoot pretty well. The safety is very nice. I do like the safety on there. Now the newer ones, like we said, is an automatic safety. I'm not a huge fan of that, but if you can get an earlier model with the safety that we're working with here, it is a pretty nice setup, it must be said. Again, and the stock is figured very nicely, just the shaping and such, and obviously for the lefties, you're going to like it quite a lot. The other thing I'm going to say, and I know I had a bit of a game with it earlier, but these are really not that hard to pump. The buddy bottle itself, you hopefully can see there, is not that big. It's only about 200 cc's in size, I believe. So pumping these is actually really quite easy, despite what you might think when you look at it. Obviously, it takes a bit more than something like a Kral puncher, Artemis M16, air arms, you name it, but they're nowhere near as bad as you think. You could definitely get away with pumping one of these and then going out for, say, a day shooting down the range, something like that. And again, talking about how many shots you do get, the manufacturers are right, which I have got to give them thumbs up to. You're getting pretty much bang on 180 full power shots. I think ours dropped off at around 174-ish, 175, going off memory here, which again, that's pretty good. That is a hell of a pretty damn big shot count, to be fair. And again, it's easy to pump, so it's a win-win. Also, the pressure gauge is where it should be. Now, I know it's a buddy bottle gun, so they can't really put it towards the end of the barrel, but you're not, it's always nice to know you're not going to blow your own lips off just when you're checking the pressure. I'll put it that way. But overall, the gun, as you can see here, this is 25 yards. Pay no attention to the mess you've got down there. This is with the JSB Exact Jumbos. The gun does shoot well. That's a 25-yard group open to the elements, and here is our 35-yard group, where you can see I've just got a little bit more used to the trigger. Again, giving it time, letting the wind die down, and the group, if anything, is actually potentially tighter than what we had at 25 yards. So there's a lot of potential with the gun and with the barrel. 50 yards was a bit of a mess. There's possibly 3 pellets in that little hole there, but again, 50 yards with a 2.2 sub 12, with the weather that we was having, we was going to lose either way. I think even if we had something like we said, the Artemis guns that we've tested, you could have probably given me an AGT Airgun or a Vulcan. The results might have been a smidge better, but it really wouldn't have been too much. To be fair, I did it for a bit of fun, like we said earlier, just to see what we could get. With our blank challenge, this is an interesting one, because we took quite a few shots just to hit that blank at 30 yards, and the reason for that is because, like I said, we didn't adjust to zero, and the first few shots we had, I had no idea where they was going, but upon inspection they was going very, very low. Now what I did down here, I did adjust to zero mid shots, because I thought I've got no idea where this is going. We're hitting wood but I can't see it, so I brought it up quite a few clicks. I think we ended up coming up about 60 clicks if memory serves me correctly. And I had a few shots down here just to see where the hell the pellets was going. Obviously with the higher pellet hole was my aiming point, and I had a rough idea where they was going. Then after that, bang. And you can see that is sweet. That is straight on the back of the primer there. So yeah, it has got a lot of potential for accuracy, I'll put it that way. I would say this gun's a diamond, a sort of diamond in the rough, but the rough being a bit what it's like out the box, if that makes sense. So when you get it out the box, the trigger's a bit heavy, you've got to get used to it, but again, with adjustment, and if you're handy with a spanner, if you can get into there and adjust them trigger sears, maybe smoothen everything out, polish it down, I think you've possibly got a winner on your hands. But again, like we said, just to wrap it up, please be careful with these, please use a moisture pack, and remember the regulators are a little bit slow, I'll put it that way, so take your time with it. So that's our review for the Walther Rotex RM8 Varmint. Thanks ever so much for hanging with us on this rather gusty day, and I don't know what we're doing for the next review. I hope you're all staying safe and there you go, perfectly timed again. I hope you're all managing to stay safe and keep yourselves all locked up indoors. like we said, best thing to do to get over that the bad old virus going around these days. But that's it for this review. No idea, like I was saying, what we're doing next, but I don't know. I'm sure I'll imagine something probably daft that we can come up with. But thanks ever so much for watching, everyone, and as always, look after yourselves and take care.